You are joining us today. Hopefully you're in the correct Zoom room for a look into Embark Education, which is a micro middle school in North Denver. And I am one of the educators at Embark. I'm Carissa Solomon. I've taught there for 3 years, the school's entirety of its existence. And as you will learn soon, our school is unique in a number of ways. And one of those ways is who my co-presenter is. And so, Joe, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Joe Reines. I'm the Director of Enterprise. I've been with the school since it started as well. My role is actually to help run a couple businesses that work in conjunction with the school to not only be real business in the real world, but provide real world learning opportunities for our students.
Thank you, Joe. And so we just got out of school about a week and a half ago. And remarkably, many of our students scattered to the winds and are enjoying their summers. So since we couldn't have them here with us to help you better understand what our school is and how we operate, we are very fortunate to have had a recent PBS recording done in our school in which our learners directly spoke about their learning for an external audience. So we're going to go ahead and play that clip for you right now. So our students and one of our fellow educators, Brian Hayosaka, can introduce you to our school. Roll clip, Joe.
Embark is an idea. It's an idea born out of a need for change in education. So if you tighten that screw, it'll move the brain only. So give it like maybe one shoulder. And to be more specific, Embark is a micro school embedded within small businesses, typical coffee, and framework cycles. And what we need to do is measure the biggest changes, the biggest cause, and then we're going to add a link. When you think about education very differently, our education is centered on the learner, but it also centers on this idea that learning needs to be contextualized, embedded, and by teaching. So we have to throw out a lot of paradigms of what education has been thinking about what could education look like. I just feel like I learned better in this situation. I don't think at the beginning of this year I thought I needed to be at a traditional school, sitting down at a computer, listening to a teacher talk all day. So much of it is space for our learners to find their own voice. Like a revolutionary style of learning where it's a lot more free. They give us a lot more time to do our own work, really. We just feel so proud to create a space where students see themselves, feel safe, feel comfortable, and feel at home. I know I can be myself. I know people support who I am, and they're really like nice to me, and people just help me do everything. I know I can be my inner self. Like at other schools, I couldn't bring my inner child out, but now I know that at Embark I can. I do think the name Embark is so significant, not because they hadn't been embarking on a journey. They've been on a journey all along, but I didn't even know that something magical happens during these adolescent ages, and that is they're embarking on the rest of their life. I guess what we've been using is real world learning. So Embark is a micro middle school. We are a middle school, traditional grades 6, 7, and 8. Currently we have 28 students, and we always hover around 30. One of the things that people don't often notice is our enrollment. In fact, they do notice, but what it doesn't say is that many of these drinks were actually created from scratch.
Hey y'all, how is that playback working for you? I'm not sure if it's my internet or perhaps the challenge of the video in general.
It's a little quiet, but I did hear some good bits of it.
Looks like others are agreeing with that assessment.
Yeah, if it works, I don't know if there's a better way to play it where it's can play louder, but we can, if it's not easy to hear, we can just kind of share the overall idea.
For sure. Joe, why don't you go ahead and drop the link to it in the chat at some point for everyone, and we can just talk about it instead. Man, it is all about flexibility today. So while Joe is getting that shared, so you can see on this screen, yes, we are Embark Education. We are a micro middle school. Joe, will you go back one slide, please?
Yeah.
2 slides. One more. We are a micro middle school that is embedded in 2 small businesses. one of them being a coffee shop, Pinwheel Coffee, and one being a bike shop, Framework Cycles. And so the idea behind our school is that students' learning experiences are crafted according to 3 design pillars. One, that our work, whenever possible, is embedded within our shops so that there is authentic real-world learning with real-world results that students can observe. 2, that we integrate contents whenever possible, so students never feel like they're attending a social studies lesson or a math lesson per se, but seeing how all those skills come together in order to make those real impacts in the world. And then 3, that we are learner-centered, hence our presence here today. And we really focus on putting our learners first, providing them with voice and agency to make as many developmentally appropriate choices as possible. That doesn't mean that they get to choose like, hey, I care about math today and I'm not going to care about it tomorrow, but rather within priorities that we have kind of laid out for them, they're able to make choices and decisions about the when and where the discrete pieces of those things happen. So a student may choose to focus on creative writing for an entire semester as it relates to one of our learning experiences. And that's great. And we understand, because we have students for a whole 6 through 8 progression, that that is their choice now, and that we can help guide them to kind of level that out in future times. And so, Joe, do you want to add a little bit about our very first pillar, embeddedness, as that is one of the things that makes us truly unique, even in the learner-centered world?
Yeah, so with embeddedness, there's this amazing opportunity that we do have just 2 real-world businesses between the coffee shop and the bike shop. And the goal for embeddedness for us is that it starts with the businesses. And it is the primary goal, and the secondary goal is to find those real-world educational opportunities. We kind of built it that way, even though like we exist, all the businesses exist to serve the educational goals. That kind of prioritizing, it lets the businesses kind of thrive and be robust, which in turn offers more robust experiences for students. When we want to do a project around working with customers, and the difference between working with 7 or 100 is kind of depending on how successful the business is. And also, it's not really real world if the businesses are like bending and shaping and changing too much to accommodate the students. If instead they're like being held to the real standards of the businesses, then we're really pushing them and challenging them to do amazing things and then actually get their work brought into the shops. And so for embeddedness is really running successful businesses first and finding those opportunities. Those opportunities come in 3 different ways, at least the way I think about it, where Chris has said in the past, and it's a beautiful description, that like sometimes some of our learning experiences aren't necessarily about changing the shop's operations, but the shop's like a great window into the world of, so that way they can see something that's happening in the shops, and then we can explore that topic. Other times, the students are doing things where they are changing our shop operations. They're bringing in new vendors for us to work with and sell. They're changing some of our policies, and that's amazing. And then the third level is when they do things that the shops couldn't do on their own. And all 3 are amazing opportunities for learning. And there's this different kind of ways that they can interact with the shops and to get real world experiences. And so one of our learning experiences Chris is going to introduce is the one we did most recently, where she was having students try to bring a product and an art piece into the shops.
Awesome, thank you, Joe. Will you flip to the next slide? Cool. So as Joe said, we often start with our shops as the place that guides how we design our learning experiences. Just to give you a little bit more of a window into the education side of that, we do design approximately 6-week-long learning experiences that one follows the other throughout the course of our school year. And one of the ways that we try to focus on student voice and choice is that students almost always have an option between 2 different learning experiences. Now, those 2 different learning experiences will all fall under one umbrella. So we're sure that there is some baseline content that all students are getting. So for example, one of the things that you're seeing up here as a possibility was obviously under an umbrella of like, hey, we haven't tied science in a lot recently. We really want to put the content of science at the forefront. But as Joe said so well, in that first layer of embeddedness, we want our shops to be a window on the world. We want to approach this content through understanding from our shops. And so students would be able to choose between either exploring the science of cycling more into physical science, or the chemistry of coffee for that 6-week experience. They would all get the framing of scientific method. What does it mean to conduct research, to complete a lab report, as well as in these 2 learning experiences, the M products were actually videos to share on our 2 shops social media feed to give our customers a better understanding of the science behind the products that we sell. So they were able to get that videography and storytelling component too. But students were able to choose, hey, I'm not really feeling the physical sciences right now, or man, I really want to spend more time with coffee, and make that decision to be in one or the other learning experience. Next slide, Joe. You want to take us here for a second?
Yeah, for sure. And so a couple ways that the embeddedness works and how the projects come about is oftentimes it's with a real need. And so what you're seeing up here are some examples of some things students brought into the shops. They brought in for kind of more of a thinking of through your purchasing power and how we're spending. We brought in more diverse businesses with, there's a pie shop and a helmet helping company that both were supportive of different BIPOC groups. And so the students were able to identify those for us and help bring those products into the shops for us to sell. They were able to find a new coffee roaster when we actually needed a new coffee roaster to find. And then sometimes they do things like the lemon lavender latte up there. That's a student made drink. And so students were able to identify things that were needed in the shops and bring those in. And so often they're responsible for bringing in new products. And so that's kind of where the learning experience we're going to talk about today came about of what's another opportunity for students to create a possible product to bring into the shop instead of just finding them.
So before we go into a little bit more detail around a particular learning experience, are there any questions that we can answer for you about our overall approach to learning?
If you do have a question, feel free to either add it in the chat or just hop off mute.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you for that cue. All right, Joe, next slide. So fun. I feel like I have a clicker, except it's a human. Love you, Joe. So actually I lied. Go back one. So we, this spring, Joe and I were discussing how we could craft a new authentic learning experience for our students. And one of the things that Joe has said a number of times over the 3 years that I've been working with him is that Pinwheel, our coffee shop, is amazing. And we get a lot of customers from foot traffic and word of mouth, but we've never really tried any active promotional marketing. So discounts, some kind of sale, something to bring in a new customer base. So I knew that he had this need, and I had a desire as an educator. It was towards the end of the school year, and I really wanted my students to engage in something super hands-on that involved some art and some math. Those were 2 things that we hadn't necessarily touched on throughout the course of the school year. And so they were front of my brain as things I was interested and knew would captivate student attention and fill in some of those gaps that we had throughout the school year. So I took those ideas to Joe and we had a conversation, and Joe and I were able to come up with a learning experience that we thought fulfilled all of those criteria. It got some of the academic content I was interested in. It was able to do something promotionally for Pinwheel that Pinwheel had never been able to do on its own. And it allowed students to see that real world impact in the world. So Joe, you want to start from where the shops approached it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's fascinating about this is, since we hadn't done any marketing like this before, is I had a sense of some of the questions I was asking students, but I didn't know the answers. And so we did things like, how many people do you think we'd even see in a week? And so we started looking at some of the up here as an example of some of our sales data that we gave the students the real world sales data, and we're like, dive in, let me know, how do you think you'd find how many people we see a week? And there was fascinating conversations. It was math in a way that was deeply tangible. It wasn't just numbers on a page. It was let's wrap our heads around what this number means and then see what we can learn from it. So it was a lot of logical kind of problems of trying to solve is seeing 200 transactions a day mean that we see 200 people, or are sometimes people buying a drink for two people? Sometimes someone's buying a drink for their friend who's next to them, so maybe we saw two people. There's a lot of really interesting data going into solving how many people we see a week, and then after that, wondering how many of those people would actually want to do something like this postcard. So kind of doing a percentage of those people. And then beyond that, I'm wondering how much will this all cost? And so lots of fun math and just thinking through, which was great because it was very real, very tangible. It's what the shops would do to run a marketing program like this. So to have students do it was just amazing work.
And I realized we got ahead of ourselves. What Joe and I decided we were interested in having the students do was create what we were calling promotional postcards. And so the idea behind the postcards is that there would be student generated art on one side. So we would purchase blank postcards and the students would make art, which I'll show you in a second. And on the back, because you can find a holiday for everything, June 1st was National Pen Pal Day in the United States. And so we decided to have students write prompts that our customers could engage with. They could send a little message to a friend, a message, a haiku, a shared memory, make a connection with a friend in the Denver metro area. And if that postcard went through the mail and the receiver brought it into Pinwheel, there was a sticker on the back that would give them one free drink from Pinwheel Coffee in the month of June or July. So with this idea, right, we had the art, which you'll see in a second, that students got to create. We got to tie into this idea of storytelling, right? How do you help others who might not be so used to writing an actual postcard or letter to a friend anymore out of the blue or a family member? What would it look like for them to rekindle their haiku abilities? What would it look like for them to think about the last time their friend made them laugh and write that on a postcard and send it away? And then we would get the added bonus of hopefully expanding the customer base for Pinwheel. If people come in and enjoy our shop with one free drink, then they're more likely to visit us again. So we took all of that to the students. And then as Joe so brilliantly said, we like literally gave them access to our Squarespace data. And we started to ask them, you know, how many customers do you think are going to do this? How much is that going to cost? What supplies are we going to be paying for in order to make this happen? And it was really, really fun to work on these open-ended math questions because we honestly didn't know. We analyzed the data in real time with them. And at the same time, we got to work on things like percentages, averages, which data points tell you different information. And also it was hilarious because students are like, oh yeah, if we see, you know, 1,200 customers in a week, we should definitely print 800 postcards. You're like, okay, that's kind of a lot. But it was really fun to go through that. So we were able to do some of that fun math with the students. And then once we had an idea of what our cost would be and how many postcards we were hoping to print, change slide, Joe, we got into the super fun art piece where we told students we wanted them to make some block printing postcards. So we ordered all of our supplies for block printing. We had linoleum blocks, cutters that they actually had to cut into the blocks with to make their own stamps. And you can see students in various phases of creation here. It was super fun. We got to work with interesting abstract artistic concepts like the idea of negative space, why sometimes simplicity is better when you're manufacturing many things. We got to talk about intellectual property and the difference between them printing lots of first edition postcards with the same stamp versus as many of them wanted to do when they saw how much work actually went into producing original art. They're like, can't we just photocopy it? Like, no, there's a difference, right? Like that's not original artwork. That's another step removed from original artwork. And so I'm happy to say that in the entire process, there was no bloodshed, which was great since we were working with some sharp tools. We were able to do a lot of different trial and error. They also had to think about what made them happy and what actually fit with a coffee shop. So like our student that loves frogs really wanted to make a frog stamp. And we got to go through that brainstorm process of like, okay, cool. How does that have to do with coffee? Right. And so we ended up with a frog that had like a coffee cup as its like thought bubble. And like inside the coffee cup thought bubble, it said coffee or Pinwheel, which they had to write backwards because of a stamp. So it was really, really fun. It was engaging. They learned artistic concepts that can apply to lots of things in life. as well as like a whole bunch of resilience, because it turns out when you print individual postcards, it's really hard not to get your dirty fingerprints on the part that our customers are going to write on. And so we started out with 500 blank postcards, and we ended up with 150 postcards that were actually at the quality that we were willing to put into our shops to have customers pick up. So if you remember that 800 number, like, no. But it was really, really fun to see them go through that process and realize how much work this would take, that things that are fun can also be work too. Joe, you're up.
Yeah, and so it turned out amazing in the shop. They made this amazing display that you can see up here, where the postcards were displayed, and there's a little explanation of what we were doing, and the customers really loved it. It's one of those kind of things that, like, and when the students were guessing 800, it was obviously high to an adult, and we just let them kind of figure that out on their own. But the results were great. We saw probably about 50% of the ones we made get taken up, and people wrote to a friend and a loved one, and we sent them out. And today, actually, it's so fun to say this, like an hour before this presentation, someone returned their first one to get a free drink. So we'll see what the summer brings with people bringing these back in, but the students did. For the people who did it, I think is a really, really fun way to engage with our community, and also happen to be marketing for the shop. So overall, hugely successful. Delighted that the project just ended last week and the first one's been returned already. So we'll see what the rest of the summer brings for seeing how this turns out, and happy to report to the returning students next year of how their postcards went.
And so that is by and large what we wanted to share with you today. An overview of what our school is and how we do what we do, as well as to dive into a more specific example. Joe, if you could pop to the next slide for a minute. We at Embark are prolific in sharing our stories. And so I'm assuming that the Learner-Centered Collaborative will provide you guys with access to, or if not, please do provide them with access to this slide deck. But just a number of resources if you want to hear other stories that have come from our community. Some are focused on specific learning experiences, as this was, and others are just about different ways in which we approach education. And then I am going to make a hasty exit because I have to be somewhere in 5 minutes as relates to my misunderstanding time zones. But I'm going to leave you with the amazing, amazing Joe, who will be able to answer all of your questions at the highest degree. And my contact information is on the last slide. So please feel free to reach out. I love chatting with people about what we do, and I'd love to learn more about what you all do, as I'm sure there are lessons we can apply in our own spaces too. Thanks, sorry, bye.
Thank you so much.
Take care. All right, so Joe, thank you so much for staying on just for a few more moments. We do have about 5 minutes left. If there are any questions, comments about the information that was shared, feel free to, again, either hop off mute or put the questions in the chat.
Hi, Joe, I have a question. If you I very impressed by all of the real world cross-curricular projects that go on. And I am just so much wondering about the planning of these projects and what kind of schedule you all have for teachers to be able to do such incredible cross-curricular, real world applicable planning.
Yeah, and so when it comes to planning a lot of these, sometimes it begins with the seed of, like I mentioned earlier, like I will come to our bigger education team with like a need in the shop of, hey, we really need to this, and sometimes it's like the roaster, like we can take some time finding a new coffee roaster. And other times it's like the fridge broke and they're like, do you need that fixed this week? I was like, yeah, and it's a terrible plan because students are going to get us a new fridge in the week, and it's also not a very creative project where there's one solution of just buy a new fridge. But so it'll start there, and then, or sometimes the education team will have a, like we mentioned earlier, like a project that they want to use the shops as lens for the world, of like if we're doing social justice, we would, like what can we do in the shop? So it would come from that place. But the once a week, the whole education team gets together and we present upcoming projects and kind of workshop them together, or kind of a critical friends kind of circles the way we approach it. And so there would be, if an educator is presenting a plan that they have for learning experience, like myself and other people on the enterprise team can kind of talk about the real world implications, and sometimes things are feasible and sometimes they're not, and we kind of co-design to bring those projects together. So like a bike shop or a coffee shop manager can kind of help craft that, or we can come and present a project that the educators can brilliantly have creative insights into doing something really fun and different than just the education or the enterprise team would think on their own. So it's weekly meetings and just sharing, getting all the voices in the room and kind of co-designing is usually our approach.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Joe, how many learners are there in the school? And then how often are they in the businesses?
So there are 30 students in our micro school. And so in the businesses, it really depends on up to them. Since they can craft their own schedules, they will sign up for shifts. And sometimes there's these fun shifts where they will just come in and kind of learn basic mechanic skills or barista skills for about 30 minutes at a time. And they could do that once a day if they want, twice a day if they want more, and daily. And then other times on a project like this, we would have them sign up specifically for their project, where they would come in and they would learn what it's like to interact with people, to like, if we're going to offer a product like this, like, hey, we have this postcard to fill out. They would sign up for shifts specifically for that. Or other times, like in the bike shop, they would sign up for shifts to work with the mechanics for like the science of cycling video that Chris had talked about earlier. They sign up specifically to ask the mechanics, what do you think would be good science lessons in the bike shop? So they are this, I mean, the shops are truly an extension of the school. And so they can be there kind of at their own discretion, a couple hours a day. And sometimes we don't see a kid for a few weeks because they're just busy doing something else in maybe the other shop or in neither shop sometimes, depending on how they make their schedule.
Great, so cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe, again, for sharing all about the really great things that you all are doing over at Embark. Like Carissa mentioned, if you all do have any other questions or want to just continue learning, we'll make sure that you have access to all of these slides with their contact information to keep the conversation going.